Did you notice Robin Arryn at the Kingsmoot wearing his mom's breastfeeding shirt?
I did not notice that, but he does suck a boob.
He's a boob sucker. A toothless boob sucker.
Boob sucker. Welcome back to Shat on TV Game of Thrones edition, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the queen of all HBO shows, Game of Thrones. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, fresh from kayaking the Lower Salt River, the King Bee.
What is West of Westeros?
And this is our bonus fan mail episode where we look back at the series finale of Game of Thrones and provide our feedback on the top listener emails and voicemails. You heard our Deep Dive Thursday, but we had so many more emails and voicemails pour in that we decided to do this extra edition. So King B, thanks so much for joining me in reading this 20 or so emails, plus about 5 voicemails that we're going to rip through tonight just to get a couple more voices in before we close out this season of Game of Thrones.
It's a chattering bunch, that's for sure.
And just as a reminder, this is not our final episode, so don't unsubscribe from the podcast. We have several things coming up. This is our second small council. Next week on June 4th, we'll have the Thronies and season recap. The season recap will be a look at the entire season 8, and deeper into the series as a whole. And the Thronies is an opportunity for the listeners to tell us what they liked most about the show, basically like the Academy Awards or the Viewer's Choice Awards for Game of Thrones. Just go to shatontv.com/Thronies, read about all the categories, and vote for your favorites, and then we'll have that episode on June 4th. And then on June 11th, everyone's been writing in their rewrites. We have over 80 rewrites, and if you want to get your rewrites in, again, that's your way of writing a better version of what you saw, a scene, an episode, or even a season of Game of Thrones. You can go ahead and write in at host@shatontv.com. Again, try to keep that about 500 words or fewer because we're reading through all of these and trying to fit as many as we can into the podcast. So King B, a lot of people have been writing in on YouTube and Twitter asking, where is the King B? What happened to him? Obviously, you've been very, very busy. And you actually helped me handpick every single email and voicemail that went into this week's episode. So we've got, like I said, around 20 to go. Was there anything that stuck out to you for season 8 that you wanted to talk about before we got started? Kind of your closing thoughts on the season.
You know, normally I'm really quick to pull the trigger on banging on something for its negatives or shouting for its positives. And, I'm more than willing to get combative with fans and let them know how much I value their opinions. I think that I really, as much as I hate to say it, really jumped into the middle of the road on all of it. For the last 10 years, this has been the best thing that we've had on TV. I have never myself worked one job for 10 years in a row without trying to self-destruct in every way imaginable. So I feel I'm incredibly sympathetic to everyone that was involved with the production of this show. Is it what I wanted? Probably not. But I'm not losing any sleep. And honestly, I'm excited for the next thing. I think that we really have to pump the brakes on any sort of animosity or unhappiness that we feel, because ultimately every TV show, every bit of artwork, it's all fleeting. It exists in its time and space, and once you've taken it in, it's time to, move on to the next thing. I don't want to watch swords and dragons and magic anymore. I'm ready for something new. I'm not one of those Star Wars fans that just wants to see lightsaber stories for the next 30 years and share it with my kids or what have you. I'm ready for something new.
All right, and that was King B's closing thoughts on season 8. Without further ado, we're going to get straight into these emails. So King B, take us to the small council.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
Our first email comes in from listener Carl Flink, who writes in, both of you have made it clear that you most appreciate the political machinations of the series. I appreciate that this series has stayed true to the original nature of the first 2 amazing books. Political intrigue, moral ambiguity, and real danger embedded in the landscape of soaring high fantasy. At various points in the series, different focus points rose to prominence: war, sex as power, Machiavellian politics, etc. And now in season 8, high fantasy has arrived. I think this is a particular reason so many are wringing their hands and gnashing their teeth. Pure high fantasy is still not something the mainstream public has a true taste for. with perhaps the exception of the Lord of the Rings movies. It is still the province of so-called nerds. As long as Game of Thrones stayed under the comfortable roof of political intrigue, treachery, and acceptable softcore porn, the general audience is comfortable, but bring out the dragons, White Walkers, and such, the fear of being declared a nerd arises. A metaphor for Season 8, I propose, is that we are in the endgame of a chess match. Most of the pieces are off the board, and the remaining pieces are chasing each other around an open board. The moves come fast and furious, and are not all that interesting as the moves were when the game had more pieces on the board. What is interesting is the chase and the action as the players hurtle toward a conclusion. I agree that there have been some goofy moments, although I never hated them, this season. I've been riveted to the action and cinematic grandeur on the screen, watching as pieces are taken from the board, often in very unexpected ways. I'm taking the ride rather than wanting the writers to confirm my theories, and I'm loving it. Unlike many, the speed of the season is not frustrating or concerning me. This is the endgame when everything happens like an out-of-control train pounding down the rails toward a train station and final resolution. And that comes from Carl Flink.
Carl, you hit the nail on the head. I really couldn't agree with you more. You know, if you think about a world of intrigue and little slips here and there and little coups, like eventually there's going to be a war, and all the political sneaking around kind of falls by the wayside because body counts are rising. This is the result of the last few seasons that we watched. It makes perfect sense to me.
Carl, you used the analogy of a chess game, and I thought that was a really smart one. It helped me understand what you were saying. I almost look at it like when you're seeing a painting, like a Bob Ross painting, right? And he's putting all the pieces on the other. Like, what's it going to be? I don't know. How's he going to do that? What is that, a cloud?
I hope there's a cabin.
I hope there's a cabin. And then suddenly you see it, and it's like everyone was watching it. At the end, he's like, it's a castle. And everyone's like, oh, fuck that. I don't want a castle. We'll all agree that that's not solely the reason why things didn't quite click for Season 8. There were serious issues, just over-convenience in general. Things become less interesting, less intriguing as the picture becomes more clear. And instead, you shift into a new mode, which is that action-driven, fast-paced development. So great observation, Carl, and thanks for writing in. Next up, we have one from Sarah Spivey. And Sarah writes in, hey, y'all. As disappointed as I was with the pacing and convenient plot lines, the Euron and Jaime fight, at points during the season, I felt like the finale was fitting and generally well done. Then I scrolled through Twitter and saw the backlash from many, many fans who feel like they didn't get the satisfying ending they wanted. I wanted to scream, it's not about you. It's about the pains of war and the duplicity of human nature. That's Game of Thrones. Ugh. People weren't as pissed about Ned dying after we follow him all book in Season 1. People weren't as mad about the Red Wedding in book in Season 3 after putting Hope in Robb. So why are they on an uproar now? To me, it makes sense that Game of Thrones ends in an upsetting or controversial way. Do you feel like we have a customer is always right mentality when it comes to consuming media?
Sarah, you hit the nail right on the head. Fan entitlement is the new big, huge thing. It's gross. And I am not into it.
I'm glad you brought up Twitter, Sarah, because I've had the same experience where where I would watch an episode, I'd message King B, I'd message Big D, and I go, what'd you think about it? It had its strengths, it had its weaknesses. Mixed bag, you know? I think every episode this season, probably mixed bag, with maybe the exception of episode 2. I thought that was just kind of strong throughout. Then you go on Twitter, and people are acting like they just shit on screen for a half hour. And I'm like, no, there was some redeemable stuff about this. And I think it has to do with the passion people have for the show, because in order to hate something that much, you must have loved it a ton at some point, right? It's like an ex that you absolutely abhor now, but were deeply in love with before. Those relationships you had that were just kind of meh, you kind of didn't get that mad about them when they were over. But this is genuine hate. And I was shocked to see people that disgruntled on Twitter each time. It is a result of a customer is always right mentality. People had their own ideas about how they wanted things to go, and when it didn't go that way, they got upset. Thanks, Sarah, for your email. Next up, we have a short one from Aaron Peterson, who says, hey guys, fellow Westworld podcaster here as well. Love your show. What do you think about the Easter egg in the finale where Sam says Drogon was last spotted flying east toward implying Volantis, which happens to be where the hot red witch Kinvara lives. She pledged allegiance in Meereen a few seasons back. A little fan fiction for us, hoping Dany comes back, or just fun throwaway to taunt us? Thanks for your positivity, even when it's a struggle. And that comes from Aaron Peterson, editor-in-chief of The Hollywood Outsider. I didn't catch the flying east toward Volantis thing, but I did think when we saw the scene with Drogon take off with Daenerys, I said, they're trading something here. The show didn't give us a scene where Daenerys' body is discovered. And it makes sense to me logically that if Drogon is not going to kill Jon Snow and he is feeling grief over his mother, he's going to want to get the hell out of there. This is a foreign land. He's not comfortable here. He wants to take her and go. So the idea of going to Volantis sort of makes sense. And I looked a little bit deeper into this. Now, Volantis is not like just over the hill. It's far away. And if you assume that a dragon's body has that supernatural warmth to it, you're going to have a considerable amount of decay on this body. It's going to take several days to get to Volantis. And then also, if the dragon did get there, so if Drogon flies off, he lands in Volantis, Drogon can't just go like talking to people. Everyone in Volantis, although they do worship the god of light, and that's kind of the seat, like the Vatican for that belief system, if they see Drogon just flying in out of nowhere, they're going to be a little disturbed. And then it's going to take some time to like explain, hey, this is Daenerys Stormborn. You guys might know about her through your visions or whatever. She kind of needs your help. If you could bring her back. There's a lot of logistics to work out there between the dragon and the people of Volantis. I don't know if this is a viable theory, but I can certainly see if they wanted to make a movie or a follow-up sequel or a spin-off, that this would be an excellent way to set it up. Thanks, Aaron, for your email, and good luck with the podcast. Next up, we have two from longtime listener Ken L. And Ken wrote one that I've been thinking, and I'm glad that he brought it up because I didn't have a chance to get to it in our regular coverage of Game of Thrones. But it's about Robert Baratheon. And he says, all hail Robert Baratheon. Chat hosts, now that the dust has settled, can we please talk about how King Robert Baratheon, a.k.a. Bobby B, was an absolute fucking legend and all-around best king of all time? Let's look at his accomplishments. He managed to overthrow a centuries-long dynasty of inbreeding dicks by being a tremendous warrior and an all-around charismatic leader. Once king, he was humble enough to recognize that he wasn't cut out to be king, so he appointed Jon Arryn, the wisest guy he knew, as Hand, and generally filled a small council with experts in the field. He reigned over 20 solid years of peace. That is, by the way, a huge deal. Every Targaryen dealt with this or that major rebellion, often caused by their dickhead half-siblings, the Blackfyres, or their own madness or general superiority complex getting in the way. Big Bobby B just had the Greyjoy Rebellion, which was 1, put down super fast, and 2, a great fucking time by all accounts. People talk about the Siege of Pike like it was the who's who of badass fighters and a great spectacle. Also, great intuition on Robbo's part when he suggested that the bitter runaway offspring of the Targaryens might sort of want to get revenge on the people who murdered their whole family, and that slimy reachers with hidden agendas might attach themselves to the cause. If Ned hadn't been so high on his horse, Robert the Conqueror might have prevented the burning of literally thousands of little children by getting Dany killed before she could go full Hitler. All in all, I'm hopeful that Bran the Broken can rule well, given his literal supernatural knowledge of everything. Expectations are pretty high, and I'm certainly tossing my name in the hat for Master of Laws. But when all is said and done, game must recognize game. All hail Robert Baratheon. All hail Bessie's tits.
20 years of laying pipe all across the kingdom.
One of my favorite things about rewatching Game of Thrones is going back and having Robert Baratheon back as a character. Dude is an absolute joy on the show, in the books. He's so much fun. He's the depiction of what I want a king to be. Just a big, loud, drunk, violent hero of a war who just wants everybody to fucking get along and also get drunk and fuck. And if there is a spinoff, I would recommend a young Ned Stark and Robert Baratheon spinoff. How they fared through Robert's Rebellion and the friendship between those two guys would be something I could watch for seasons on seasons.
You could just go digitally superimpose some swords on a Lethal Weapon movie.
I'm getting too old for this shit. All right, and Ken L has another one, and it's about the Dothraki. He says, when we see Daenerys giving her speech about liberating the entire world, she begins by addressing her Dothraki as blood of my blood, and commends them for keeping their promises to her, for killing the enemies in iron suits and tearing down their stone houses. She then commends her Unsullied for their loyalty, and appoints Grey Worm as master of war. After a short time jump, when Sansa and company are negotiating for Jon and Tyrion's lives, they are dealing with Grey Worm, and every bit of dialogue points to the Unsullied as the sole opposing force to be reckoned with. The Dothraki are never once mentioned, which begs the question, what happened to the Dothraki? The answer is tragic. In Season 6, Episode 6, titled Blood of My Blood, Daenerys says to her new Khalasar, taken from the Khals she burned alive, every Khal who ever lived chose 3 blood riders to fight beside him and guard his way. But I am not a Khal. I will not choose 3 blood riders. I choose you all. She then charges them to help her kill her enemies in their iron suits and tear down their stone houses. Her speech in the finale is meant as a callback for her speech in Season 6. The critical point of that speech is that Dany appointed her entire Khalasar as her blood riders. Indeed, the greeting, blood of my blood, is reserved for blood riders, not any random member of a Khalasar. So what does that mean about the fate of the Dothraki? Well, according to ancient tradition, when a Khal dies, his blood riders die with him. Simply put, Dany's death likely led to a mass suicide by most of the Dothraki off screen, as tradition mandated. We see a few Dothraki walking around the ports of King's Landing. Perhaps these Dothraki decided to ignore tradition to save their own lives, but it seems unlikely that many made that choice.
Regardless, it sounds like the price of horses just got a lot cheaper in the kingdom.
And Ken, I agree that this... Just got that. Ken, I agree that this seems to be the likely thing. And I thought of it too after reading book 1 was, oh, okay, I understand when a Khal dies, like his blood riders basically are expected to commit suicide. And then, of course, as they kill themselves, their horses, King B, also get killed because you can't ride into the plains of heaven without your horse.
Did they kill their horses?
Yeah, they have to kill their horse too after they die.
What's that movie where they kill all the horses?
All the dead horses?
No.
That was all the pretty horses. And they didn't kill any horses in that.
I bet a horse died.
But again, this is one of those things where we can pose these theories, but it seems like that would be a really powerful scene that they could have brought us on screen. How amazing would that be if Daenerys is killed and you see the Dothraki basically massacring themselves and you see the downside of killing Daenerys, right? All the negative that happens with it, and how heartbroken and devastated these people are who followed her from a wasteland to conquer a new land, but then found nothing but death and defeat. I think it would have been a really powerful thing. Again, if we had to have some explanation for what happened to Dothraki, I think this is a reasonable one. Thanks, Ken, for sticking with us through both seasons of Game of Thrones, and I hope that you're with us as we begin The Watchmen this fall. Several listeners wrote in about Sansa, and I want to get to those emails now, starting with Donna Winquist. She says, "Hey guys, I'm having a hard time accepting all the praise being heaped on Sansa. She is so wise, she is the best ruler, she deserves to be queen, etc. Exactly what has she really accomplished? As a little girl, she was full of herself and whiny. Please, please, let me go to King's Landing and marry Joffrey. It's all I ever wanted. She had been wanting that for all of her 11 years. Okay, she was a child, and for the first 4 seasons, she endured a hell of a lot and survived. But she still hadn't risen up to some hero status. Her star status seemed to rise in Season 6 when she took Littlefinger's offer to bring the Knights of the Vale to Jon's rescue. She later says that she saved Winterfell. Really? She sat at the encampment outside of Winterfell with Jon, arguing that he should wait for more soldiers. He said he had to go with what he had. She couldn't have mentioned that Littlefinger was a day away? Why hold that critical piece of information back? Had they waited, it might have been an entirely different battle. How many northern soldiers and wildlings would have been saved? But no, she makes no mention of the reinforcements and sends Jon and his army to what could have been a complete massacre. So no points for that battle. I'll give her some credit for decent management of Winterfell and her concern for the welfare of her people, but there were no ingenious moves or heroics. The death of Littlefinger could have been accomplished in one episode, since the combined knowledge of Sansa, Arya, and Bran revealed to all the traitor that he was. No need for the cat-and-mouse shenanigans. Her only truly big move was at the King's Moot, when she manipulated and convinced Bran that the poor Northerners had sacrificed so much, and therefore they should be compensated with goods or coin? Excused from the next war? No, they should be independent. What exactly does that get the average Northerner? Nada. But who does it benefit? Sansa. Don't bend the knee to Bran, bend the knee to Queen Sansa. In the end, I don't really care if she rules or not, but let's not make her Sansa the Worthy. She is really just a pretty average lady who got what she always wanted, to be a princess or queen. And that comes from Donna Winquist.
I gotta disagree with you, Donna. Or while I do agree that she was a whiny little brat, dare I say it, in the beginning, I mean, she pays the price for her kind of foolish notions for what, rulership entails. And at times, she literally trades her body for, the position to wield this influence and this power. In addition to that, what do the Northerners get by remaining independent? Well, I imagine that their sons will no longer be called to be a fighting force for King's Landing. They're no longer going to have to pay any tithings or taxes likely to the rest of the kingdoms. Everything that they create or they till belongs to them.
When they claimed that Sansa was like the wisest person in the world, I was like, I don't know if she's really proven that. But she did two really big things that we should get to. One, you mentioned the Battle of the Bastards and how she could have told Jon that support was coming. I think she noticed that Jon was acting erratically, and she knows Jon. Like, she knows that he's impulsive, that he goes with his feelings, is exactly the trap that Ramsay was setting for him. And so she decided to actually play off of that. She's like, if Jon is going to be that impulsive guy, if he's going to charge headlong into battle, let me do it my way, which is to save his ass when he does that. Use him as bait, bring Ramsay's forces out, and then crush them with the Knights of the Vale. That's one. Two, if people would have listened to Sansa from the beginning of this season, we would have been in the position we were in the end, when she was saying, hey, look, I don't really trust Daenerys. Hey, look, maybe we shouldn't bend the knee to her. Hey, look, maybe you shouldn't pledge your loyalty to her as queen. She was trying over and over and over again to get people to reconsider what was going on. While everybody else was on the boat that we're going to beat the Night King and then march down to King's Landing, she brought up the questions that nobody wants to ask. It's like when you're in a business meeting and everybody's got this idea for a new product or a new marketing campaign or something like that. And there's the one person in the room who raised their hand. They're like, what's the return on this investment? And nobody wants to hear from that guy because he's like the dick that stops things, or that gal. I think Sansa is clever and wise, and she's a wise ruler. Is she the smartest person in all of Westeros? Maybe not, but she's competent.
She paid the cost to be the boss.
Is that BB King?
Are you fucking serious right now? It's James Brown, dude.
Thanks, Donna. In another email about Sansa, we have Helen from Georgia writing in, who says, a tearful moment for me was Sansa's coronation. Wow. As a woman, this scene meant so much for me to see unfold. Though we haven't seen many strong female characters on this show, they are often viewed as legitimate rulers for reasons that go beyond their genuine abilities to rule, or an established people group rallying behind them. Daenerys has dragons and a very strong military, and much of her base of followers are former slaves with little options for where to go. Cersei rules through fear, and many of her decisions are questioned constantly by the men around her. Tywin even wanted her to marry Sir Loras, minimizing her value as only significant in service or marriage to a king. I remember seeing the Northmen chant, "The King of the North" for Robb and Jon, thinking to myself, I wonder if these strong, stubborn men of the North would ever support a queen. So finally seeing the North, full of mountain men types who respond to strength over everything, chant "The Queen in the North," made me sit up in my bed, clinging to my pillow, crying. It was similar to how I felt watching the most recent Wonder Woman movie, where she runs out into no man's land and takes the fire, which rallies the men behind her to action. It's something we're starting to see more in television and movies, and I'm beyond thankful to be alive during a time where I can see a woman on screen inspiring women and men alike. And that comes from Helen in Georgia.
One of my favorite aspects of the whole Sansa ordeal is seeing her character be very regal, very powerful, very masterful in what it is she's doing, cutting to her, the actress's Twitter videos, slamming wine at basketball games, and just generally enjoying life and having a day off. Well earned, I say.
If you haven't already, go check out Sophie Turner on Instagram. Follow her. It's pretty damn hilarious. I think Sophie Turner and Maisie Williams are within 1 year of each other, like age-wise, like in real life. These are kids, I mean, relative to us. And to see her operate with that sort of poise, I'll tell you, during the closing scenes of the finale, where we get that montage of all the Starks kind of taking their roles going into the future, Sophie Turner as the Queen of the North was the only one where I looked at her and went, yes, that is what a queen looks like. This feels right to me. The other ones all felt like undeserved and weird, but something about the way she carries herself and the way that scene was shot was absolutely beautiful.
Speaking of which, you want to see a queen? Go take a double microdose of mushrooms and watch Mary, Queen of Scots. Powerful.
Next up, we have one from Alex from Ithaca. It says, hey guys, love the podcast. I have a theory that I haven't heard discussed yet. I think in the next year or so, a whole bunch of stuff is going to come out about the huge rift behind the scenes that messed up production. It doesn't make sense that the story felt so rushed. Some actors seemed displeased, or even that D&D would want to stop doing the show now. For goodness sake, for a show with state-of-the-art CGI, there was a water bottle in the last episode, and of course the infamous coffee cup. So my theory, in the next year or so, we're going to hear that the showrunners had issues with HBO, the actors had a falling out with someone, George R.R. Martin caused mayhem, something along those lines. I get the sense from the overall commentary that there had to have been a massive rift behind the scenes that somewhat sabotaged all the previous momentum and quality fans came to expect, and we'll find out about it in the next few years. Thanks for the great podcast, Alex from Ithaca.
Alex, I got a notion for you to consider. Maybe it's not this big rift that's taking place. Maybe everyone's just tired. Think about the actors Captain America and Iron Man having to go to conventions and Glad Hand and do press kits and having to answer the same questions over and over and over. These guys are in the exact same boat. For 10 years, they've been making this show. They probably had to answer the same questions to the same press crew a million times. This is the only thing that they've been able to do for 10 years of their life. I think everyone's just done and ready to move on to something new.
One piece of evidence I think would lend credence to what Alex is writing about is the videos that we've seen of the actor interviews where some of them look like borderline hostage videos. What do you think of the ending of the series? And they're like, oh, yeah, like Amelia Clark had one. She's like, best ending ever. You know, Peter Dinklage, literally, it looks like he's been taken hostage and they're giving like a video for proof of life. It's pretty concerning.
I think all those press videos just look miserable. If you think you want to be famous, take a minute and really look at those videos and reconsider.
Thanks, Alex, for your email. Next up is kind of a weird one, and you're going to have to fill in for Big D here. Ron writes in, I have a funny take on your show and specifically who you are to me. Before the days of the internet, when you listen to radio, you never knew what the radio personalities look like. So I'm sure I can't be the only person to mentally assign images to the voices. Usually they're people from other shows or TV. I haven't and will not look you guys up because I prefer to think of you as who I have assigned as your likenesses. Big D, for me, your voice, which I hear as a more deep-toned voice, conjures up a vision of someone serious and stern. Sir Davos comes to mind. So I will forever associate your voice with his face. Not sure if you're a better-looking dude than the actor who plays him, but oh well. Gene, yours was tougher for me. Your voice is kind of like a generic radio douche that you hear all across America. Not saying you're a douche, just your voice is douchey. Sorry, not sorry. You were destined to be the faceless man of the podcast in my mind. Then it hit me during the most recent Small Council podcast. You're ironically talking about your appearance. If I heard correct, you're Iranian, which I don't get out of your voice. And then in the same discussion, you or Big D mentioned the show Lost. Matthew Fox I see as someone who has your voice, a little more nasally and higher pitched. So you are forever Matthew Fox.
You know, when the guys started these podcasts long before I was in the picture, they didn't show their faces. And then someone started leaking their faces. Maybe they were trying to get a little Twitter titty on the side or something. Who can say? And I think everyone's just gotten a little bit looser with revealing their faces, which I think does kind of ruin the mystique a lot. But, you know, you can't put the shit back in the goose, as they say. I wish my friend looked like Matthew Fox. And let's just say, yes, you're right about Big D. And if you want to picture me, just think of Clint Eastwood's rascally fatter cousin. There you go.
Ron, I did this with NPR where I didn't know what any of the people looked like, and I just had my own idea of like what Terry Gross looked like, what Ira Glass looked like. I tell you, I've been disappointed every time, with the exception of Zoe Chase. Zoe Chase is a fox.
That's a dude?
No, it's a woman.
Well, that's Chase Matthews.
Yeah. I think the closest celebrity I've been compared to recently was when I went to see Avengers Endgame, and a kid pointed at me and said, hey, that guy looks like Metal Arm. And I think he was referring to Bucky Barnes from the Winter Soldier. So I think that's the mental image you should go with. But hey, Matthew Fox works for me too. Also, with regards to the douchey voice thing.
That's my favorite email.
Also, with the douchey voice thing, I used to actually have a lower register of voice and kind of grumbled my way through podcasts. But when you have to carry the actual hosting duty and do the majority of the talking, there's a responsibility to sort of keep the energy level up, and you don't notice yourself doing it, but it is a subconscious thing where you start to be like, hey, because you want to, because otherwise it would just be me and the King Bee, like, just.
Hey, did you see that show?
Yeah, man, it's all right.
It was pretty good. Hey, did you see those? Did you see those? You saw that lady, right?
Zoe Chase.
Yeah. She looked pretty good.
Anyway, Ron, thanks for writing King Bee's favorite email ever. Next up, we have one from Janet L.
Radio douche.
Not you, Janet, who says, "Hi, I wanted to thank you for your great podcasts and analysis of Game of Thrones, etc. I work in a studio all day, and your rich conversations are great content for my alone time. Anyway, I am really tired of all the comments on the 2Ds and their lack of content creation, all the fandom excuses for why the seasons are like they are, no Martin content, etc. I agree, seasons 7 and 8 were very poorly written, lacked character or narrative continuity, seemed so small for such a large story. But here's my take. The 2Ds acted like amateurs and seemed to have too much of their ego in the project. Take a step back, guys. Grow into the role. Grow up. Spread your wings. You can move on and still take an active role in the remaining seasons. There is no need to outdo the prior seasons of battles and etc. Just continue with the same level of creativity. Look, the 2Ds had control over the project. If they understood that they were not up to the task for whatever reason, they're done, they're tired, they can't write, they're sad or lost without a book to edit, why didn't they act like they had some authority and hire some writers? Clearly, there are a lot of us out here who could have pulled together plausible action and lines. They could have had control over the result and outlined their final solution to the team of writers and let them review the books in prior seasons and get to work. They would have, like the rest of us, come up with some plausible arcs and, tidy or not, plot and dialogue that befitted the characters and story. Really, I'm sure that they had the budget. Why do they need to personally control the last seasons when they were obviously done? It was so unprofessional for two guys who are named executive producers. It is and was so terribly unprofessional and sadly a poor at best ending for such a strong, richly cinematic, and compelling story. And that comes from Janet Lasher. Janet, I think we need to take a step back from this idea that we're owed something by the executive producers and the creators of the show. And remember that these two guys, the Double Ds, had the idea to do this show in the first place. They're the ones who brought together the team, who approached George R. R. Martin and said, we want to do a series here, sold it to HBO. So these guys definitely have a passion for it. And to tell somebody that the thing that they spent a decade of their lives creating, the thing that they brought to this world on screen, that they don't have the right to end it and to write the last episode and to direct the last episode, I think is a bit presumptuous. Did I like it? It wasn't the best. You're right on that, Janet. But I think that anybody who creates something this huge definitely has the right to feel ownership over it and the authority to end it the way they want.
Additionally, bringing in new creators isn't going to be a resolution that you're looking for. Think about movies like Suicide Squad, where they had to go back and reshoot half of the movie, and it's just a mess. You might get a longer product, you might get more of the product, but it's not going to get any bit better.
Also see American Gods Season 2. Next up, we have one from Emily Bjorn, who says, in your deep dive, you mentioned that Jon should have been executed and that his outfit and hair resembled Ned Stark's the day he was beheaded, which then again could have foreshadowed Jon's death. But when you think about it, Ned Stark was supposed to have been sent to the wall. Everyone agreed upon it. In the books, Yorn receives a message telling him to wait as one more will join his group. So Jon, looking like Ned on what turns out to be his last day on Earth, actually gets the punishment Ned was supposed to have had. Makes it somewhat full circle, does it not? However, I feel so bad for Jon. His watch had ended. He was done. My only hope is that he actually ditches the Night's Watch, why do they even exist, and goes to live with Tormund and the Wildlings, and Ghost. Jon always reminded me of Harry Potter, the supposed hero who constantly brings himself in dangerous situations and who needs to be saved by his loyal friends over and over again. Jon ends up being just Jon, just as Harry Potter ends up being just another ordinary wizard dad. And that comes from Emily Bjorn. Emily, I'm not sure Jon even got punishment. Honestly, the last thing we see is him riding north with Tormund. He's got a bunch of wildlings at his back. He looks back, the gate closes, and I'm like, that's it? He's lucky he's not dead or being tortured or in a dungeon somewhere. He got off scot-free as far as I'm concerned.
I mean, if you want to talk about going full circle, the show starts with him being a broody, moody little shit wanting to go off to the wall and ends with him being a broody, moody little shit going off to the wall.
What's funny to me is that no one has considered the fact that Jon living is a massive threat to this whole Kingsmoot thing they set up, right? You've got a guy who is both Targaryen and Stark, has a claim to the throne. If you send him to the north, he goes up there, he collects a bunch of wildlings, he gets pissed, he's like, you know what, I want that throne. And he comes back. What, Bran's going to stop him?
Yeah, but he's not going to. He's like the worst girlfriend. He never wants to do anything.
Where do you want to eat, John?
I never wanted this power.
All right, next up we have one from Karen, who writes in, the fact that Daenerys had just been murdered and Grey Worm was bloodthirsty from war, as we saw in earlier scenes, and also believed in the same grand plan, really threw me when we discover a few weeks later that he has only taken Jon prisoner. This guy is in command of the strongest army in Westeros at this time. Nobody in that court of lords at the Dragon Pit had anywhere near the military power that Grey Worm was in control of, yet there was no military coup to take over and rule tribute to his commander's grand plan. That I found the oddest plot twist. One thing I did enjoy was the way that during Jon and Dany's last kiss, you hear a knife going in, but you do not know which way. I enjoyed the suspense of a few seconds' doubts as to who killed whom. I would have liked to have seen Jon break down in a much more grief-stricken way.
In my rewrite, Dany does kill Jon, and then the real show starts.
I thought she had. When I was watching it, I was like, oh, fuck. Because that makes the most sense. Like, Daenerys realizes he's a threat. She's going to take him out. She's just conquered, all Westeros. He's the one thing getting in her way. And I hate to even fucking say this, but I would have been so much more satisfied if he went in there planning to take her out and she saw it coming.
I mean, in the Game of Thrones universe, your altruism and your adherence to doing the right thing is what gets you killed. She recognizes that she's always going to have to deal with him wheedling and complaining that she's not doing things the way he thinks. This is how she cuts that short.
Thanks, Karen, for your email. Next up, we have one from Reeshee. And Reeshee writes in, it's with a sad heart that I must shat on the finale and grumble bitterly about how people of color were treated in the finale. I know you're busy, but let me sum up. 1. The finale begins with out-of-control swarthy foreigners brutally executing surrendering Lannister soldiers. It's only the honorable white forces from the north who are appalled at this violence and try to stop it. Foreign people of color slaughtering innocent white people is a trope that you hear at every MAGA rally. I was half expecting Grey Worm to flash MS-13 gang signs as he slit the throats of the Lannister prisoners. 2. We see crazy Dany holding a bloodlust pep rally with out-of-control swarthy foreigners chanting, hooting, and hollering. The honorable people of the North are not participating and are appalled at the spectacle. It is then that Honorable Jon knows he's the only one who can stop the killing, so he stabs crazy Dany because we know that a man would never slaughter innocents, Mad King, Joffrey, Robert, and Stannis notwithstanding. 3. Grey Worm imprisons Jon and demands justice, but the only people who control the system of justice are apparently the rich, white, Westerosi landowners and the token Dorne prince who doesn't have a speaking part or name. So diversity, yeah. 4. The rich, white, Westerosi landowners don't include Grey Worm in any decision-making. He has an army, conquered King's Landing, fought side by side with the great houses, and should be treated as an equal. House Stark would be whites now, if not for the Unsullied. Is he treated like the decorated veteran that House Stark owes a debt to? He is not. The council tries to buy him off with land, but Grey Worm wants justice, i.e. more blood. Apparently, that is the only thing Grey Worm will ever know. The council then asks if Grey Worm is not even there, and writers saw it fit to let him stand there while the adults in the room decided the future fate of Jon and Westeros. I mean, we can't give an out-of-control swarthy foreigner a vote or say in this, can we? 5. In the negotiations, Sansa gets a separate North. While not directly on point, recall previous episodes where Grey Worm and Missandei remarked how the Northerners did not like their kind. The North is depicted as where the honorable and de facto racially homogenous people, the real Westerosi, live. And 6. So we can make the rest of Westeros great again, The writers chose to have all the out-of-control swarthy foreigners self-deport. No vote, no council. They just get up and leave because their white savior is dead and they can't self-rule. Besides, we can't have them integrate into Westerosi society, not even the good ones. Think of what it'll do to the property values. And that comes from Reeshee.
I mean, I'm not going to say that you're wrong. Is it possible that by offering Grey Worm the lands and the money, what they're really offering him is a kingdom and, in a sense, a vote in what is to come and to become a part of that kingdom?
Well, there's a certain irony to the whole thing of being able to start a house unsullied, which is they are castrated. So that ends in like one generation, basically. But Reeshee, this is a fine line to walk. On YouTube, when we do these podcasts, we put them out there, we'll get lit up immediately by people saying that we're social justice warriors, by people saying that we're leftists and snowflakes and all this stuff. And it's important to parse out the difference between understanding the world that has been developed and the way things would actually happen in that world, and understanding that the writing is from 2019. An example I would say of this is like, you can have intelligent women being treated as if they're unintelligent and powerless, and in the structure that they're in, they have no power, right? You can apply that to the Unsullied, you can apply that to Dothraki. That's not to say that they're unintelligent or unimportant, but rather that the system that they're in is treating them as such. And so that's the difference in writing, right? It's the difference between writing a stupid character and writing a character who is treated as if he is stupid. And I agree that Grey Worm was treated with utmost disrespect in this council, and I don't understand why he would have just taken that, other than the fact that he might just be fed up and wanted to get out of there. But I do think that there was certainly a demonization and marginalization of people of color, but perhaps not as pervasive as we're painting out to be here. There are multiple factors at work. And I love that you took the time to outline them. So I'm sure we're going to catch some flack on it, but it's a great way to start a conversation. So YouTubers, people on shoutontv.com, be sure to write in your responses to this. Also, as a reminder, the emails that we're reading are not being read in their entirety. So Reeshee had a lot more to say on this point. You can go to shoutontv.com, go to the Game of Thrones Small Council section and read these in their entirety. You can interact with other listeners there and write your responses to these emails. I'm also in there responding to all of them as well. Next up, we have one from our friend Derek English, who writes in, "Not only do I believe Bran knew the whole time that he would become king, I believe he clued Sansa, Arya, and Tyrion in on it also. He had already handpicked, pun intended, Tyrion as the hand of the king back in episode 2 when they had their talk alone. In that episode, Tyrion even looks around and tells a room full of people, 'I think we will make it.' Guess what? Every single person in that room survived that battle. Bran needed someone to get his foot in the door for him and nominate him as king. Bran knows he cannot connect to people on a personal level at this point in his life. He's basically a robot. He needed a mouthpiece, someone to tell the lords of Westeros how amazing he would be as king. Again, I believe Bran told Tyrion he would have to make his speech during their chat. As a reward for his ability to sway the crowd, Tyrion basically becomes the ruler of Westeros for day-to-day things. Tyrion may not have known specifics, such as the brother and sister dying, but he knew enough. He also knew that he had to convince Jon to kill Daenerys. Otherwise, in order to just have her die, he could have just picked up a knife from any of the corpses laying in the city and killed her as she approached during the speech. No, he knew he had to survive, a sort of predetermined fate.
Bran's a really tricky character for me. His detachment from humanity makes him not incredibly interesting. I've heard a lot of people kind of rail about how they didn't like him being chosen because he didn't do anything. I think had he been featured more in the show as a viewer, it wouldn't be a revelation that he becomes king, and it wouldn't make sense in the story because then he'd be more of a target. I mean, he is potentially the softest target in all the kingdoms due to his disabilities. Just a tricky character to deal with.
One of the unfortunate stackings of the narrative that puts Bran at a disadvantage from an emotional impact and also from being considered with the significance that he deserves is the fact that they separated out Bran's story from season 8 to previous seasons. So all the stuff that happened north of the wall with Mira Reed and Jojen and the Three-Eyed Raven and Hodor's death and all that stuff seems like such a distant memory that it's not fresh in our minds. And so either through flashbacks or through some sort of callbacks, it really would have been helpful to really increase the impact of what Bran was doing. But I think the rushed pace of season 8 leaves a lot open to interpretation, and I can absolutely see that Bran's conversations, especially with Tyrion in private, might have involved some tokens of prophecy and some side dealings. Again, when Jon asks Bran to tell Sansa and Arya the truth of his nature, we don't even see that scene. We don't know what happened there. What were the words that were exactly spoken? So a lot of things could have been plotted in the background. Thanks, Derek, for your email. And now it's time for our actuallys. This is where people write in and correct things that we got wrong. And the first one comes from Samantha B., who writes, correct me if you've already discussed this in previous episodes, but Daenerys isn't the mother of dragons. She's the mother of wyverns. Dragons have 4 legs. Wyverns have 2, with their wings serving as their front legs. I learned that tonight through the Twitter storm that commenced after the episode, and now I'm irritated that if this is true, which Wikipedia confirmed, that was such a huge mistake this entire time. Hashtag mother of wyverns.
It's not a sailboat, it's a schooner, you idiot.
That's actually an astute observation, King B, because a wyvern is a type of dragon. So in that sense, they are dragons. A wyvern is like a subclass of dragon. You're right, dragons, the standard dragon has like 4 legs plus the wings. A wyvern has 2 legs plus the wings.
The fact that there are dragons on Wikipedia makes me want to go lay in the street.
The same thing is applied to ravens and crows, right? So we talk about in Game of Thrones, the book, they use the term raven in the show, where often in the books it's crows. King B, you, when we covered The Crow for Shat the Movies, our sister podcast, which you can find at shatthemovies.com, you pointed out there's a distinct difference between ravens and crows, but people on TV and film don't tend to notice those things.
No, but you call them both corvids.
Thanks for writing in, Samantha. Next up, we have one from Michael Sartain, who's a retired captain in the U.S. Air Force. He says, Joanna Robinson from Vanity Fair confirmed it was indeed snow we saw during the finale. If you remember, it was also snowing before and after the Battle of the Bastards, but not during. Actually, it was snowing because winter wasn't over until the prophecy was fulfilled. Jon stabs Daenerys, bringing forth Drogon, literally a lightbringer, and causes the Iron Throne to burst into flames, again from the prophecy. After Daenerys is dead and the Iron Throne destroyed, we see it has stopped snowing and winter is over. And that comes from Michael Sartain, retired captain, U.S. Air Force.
And it only took 10 years.
Thanks, Michael, for writing in. And finally, we have a special email from listener Mike in D.C., and he simply says, hey guys, did I hear you guys correctly that you're going to do a podcast series on HBO's Watchmen? That sound you just heard was my dick hitting the underside of my desk. Keep up the great work, Mike in DC. Mike, I'm really glad you wrote it on this one because it gives us an excuse to announce, yes, if you haven't heard already, we are covering The Watchmen. If you haven't seen the trailer, it is fantastic. So as soon as our coverage of Game of Thrones wraps up, Big D, King B, and I are getting hard at work and reading back through The Watchmen, watching the movie, and then getting ready for the series. It will be executive produced by Damon Lindelof, who we're big fans of from The Leftovers and Lost, and also was written by Alan Moore, who is one of my favorite comic writers. So we are super amped to be doing this. Dicks against the table, Mike. Dicks against the table. Thanks, Mike, and everyone who wrote in your emails. Now it's time to pivot quickly to our voicemails. We had a few voicemails that people called in. Again, you can always call in 914-719-SHAT and leave us a voicemail, and it might get on the air. This one comes from Pat in Oregon.
Hello, Gene and Big D. Thank you for your podcasting efforts. This regards Game of Thrones, last episode. I was wondering if you had considered that Bran is actually represents objectivity and truth in history and not really a political actor at all. And they sort of left us with the truth will set you free. Just a thought. This is Pat in Oregon. Love your show. Bye-bye.
I need more Pat in my life. Just sounds like a real nice lady.
Yeah, Pat, thanks so much for your call. I think you're onto something there in the fact that we call Bran creepy or weird. He's impersonal, robotic, whatever. And I think part of it is our discomfort with factual storytelling, right? Everything else in this world, Game of Thrones, is told through some sort of a narrative. There's embellishment, there's legend, right? And Bran is just, he's down to what is real and doesn't really add much flourish to it other than the, why do you think I came all this way? He's a pretty straight shooter. And that does conflict being the objectivity versus the subjectivity of the politics that are going on in the show. And that might be why he sort of rubs a lot of characters the wrong way. Thanks, Pat, for your voicemail. Next up, we have one from Marvin Garcia.
Hello, Shout Out TV team. This is Marvin Garcia speaking.
Hello, Marvin Garcia. This is the King Bee speaking.
Hello, Marvin Garcia. This is Gene Lyon speaking.
Thanks for calling in.
Next up, we have a voicemail from Ryan from Minnesota.
Hey guys, what up? My name is Ryan from Minnesota. Hey, thanks again for all of the time and effort that you've taken to put in this podcast. It's really appreciated. Hey, so I guess I wanted to bring up a point that I'm not quite following from kind of the general consensus of you guys and some other feedback, which is, Bran knew that this was the outcome all along, and he kind of manipulated events in order for this to happen. The way I saw it, and unless I'm missing something, which could be perfectly true, is that this is kind of the best outcome that Bran saw for the realm and for the rest of the universe that Game of Thrones lives in, right? So, perhaps he saw what would have happened if he did not tell Jon his heritage. And that could have been the outcome of Dany destroying the entire world and burning everyone and becoming a crazy dictator. Maybe he saw those events and this was the best possible outcome for everyone involved. So, meaning he again, maybe didn't want to be king. That could have been very well true. But he was there in order for that event to happen. And again, this being the best possible outcome that he saw in whatever magical visions that he sees. So that's the way I saw it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I didn't catch something, but I don't think Bran should get all of the heat that I think he's been kind of getting from critics about manipulating all these events for himself. So anyway, thanks again. Appreciate your time. Looking forward to Westworld and all the other fun podcasts that you guys are going to put together. All right, bye-bye.
Ryan raises an interesting point. We talk about all the things that went wrong and why Bran didn't stop them, but few people are talking about how bad things could have been. And it's possible that Bran, in the advice that he gave, was kind of like a Doctor Strange sort of figure, where he realized that the things that happened had to happen the way they happened in order to achieve a certain outcome. Perhaps, for instance, Bran sees a series of events that leads to the outcome that he finds desirable. And he's going to stick to those series of events. Like, imagine that you had a vision that you were driving down a road and you crashed your car, you got out of the car, you walked down the road a bit, you fell into a ditch, you went through sewage, and somehow you found yourself at the greatest burger joint of all time. And you really want to go to that burger joint. You're not going to deviate any of those things when you actually wake up from your vision, because you want to get to the place that you wanted to go. And that's probably the worst analogy ever. But he could have seen horrors that he was trying to avoid, or he could know that this specific series of events would end with Jon alive and in the north, Sansa alive and ruling the north, Arya alive and on her way, and himself on the throne to rule benevolently, and that's what he chose to go with.
Personally, I never really felt he was manipulating things, more just kind of surfing over the top of them. I think the most manipulation I feel he ever really does to make events happen was when he wargs into those crows to catch the Night King's attention in the battle at Winterfell. Beyond that, he's kind of just like a computer. He's not giving anyone information until they're prompting him for it first.
Thanks, Ryan, for your voicemail. And finally, our last voicemail of the Game of Thrones Small Council comes from Courtney from Pennsylvania.
Hey guys, it's Courtney K from PA. I'm commenting on the Game of Thrones episode, the finale. And I just want to throw it out there, and give my opinion on the whole Jon and Dany thing. I really think that Jon is literally the worst boyfriend in the history of Westeros. Gene, I think you put it really well when you said, she was embracing him and he fucking stabbed her. In that moment, I was really emotional when I saw that, because I just couldn't believe that Jon would really do that. And I think you could see it on her face after the fact, too, that she couldn't believe that he would do that. I don't think I was 100% sold on the whole Jon and Dany thing, but even at that, it just was so sad. And he basically got Gimlet killed too. And for him to do this to her, I think it just officially lands him on the worst boyfriend in Westeros. I hope he doesn't go up there and get some happy little wildling family, because Dany is dead and she didn't deserve that. He could have at least been like, hey, babe, you're acting a little, nutso. You're not really being yourself. Couldn't even sit down and have a real talk with her. He just stabbed her. So, yeah, screw Jon Snow. He's the worst boyfriend. # Team Targaryen for life. Bye, guys. Have a great week.
He's always in a bad mood. He never wants to do anything. He's not interested in a promotion at work. He always wears the same outfit. The guy's just a real drag. I think you're right. Oh, he doesn't put out either.
I mean, Westeros has had some pretty bad boyfriends, though. We've had Ramsay Bolton. We've had Joffrey. Courtney, when you said he could have been like, hey, babe, you're acting a little, I totally agree with that. You stabbed a woman to death who was your partner, who was trying to share a realm with you. And even if she's batshit crazy, the least you could do is say, hey, listen, I think you're acting a little crazy. Or perhaps even challenge her to combat of some sort. Like, you wouldn't do that to another man. You wouldn't just fucking stab him in the chest without even giving him a chance to defend himself. That's cowardice.
What's the worst thing you ever did in a fight with a girlfriend?
I asked her to move out.
That's it?
I think so.
That's as bad as it got? All right, I'm not going to answer that question then. I kicked an exercise ball down a hallway. It knocked every family photo off the walls as it ping-ponged back and forth. And then when she came out to investigate what had happened, I looked her square in the eye and spit on her hardwood living room floor.
Ooh.
She said, clean that up. And I said, ha! Picked up my things and I left.
Still not as bad as stabbing.
Well, no, I'm not a bad guy.
All right, Courtney, thanks for your voicemail. Thanks everyone who called in and wrote in for this final Game of Thrones Small Council. It's been a great journey with all of you. As a reminder, we still have a few episodes left. Next Tuesday, we'll have the Thronies. And right now you can go to shatontv.com/Thronies to vote for your favorite Game of Thrones moments, characters, and awards. We'll have that episode on June 4th. And then on June 11th, you can tune back in for our rewrites edition, where we will be reading your improvements on the writing for Game of Thrones. Again, if you'd like to write in for that, just host at shatontv.com. Try to keep it to 500 words or less. And that concludes this edition of Shat on TV Game of Thrones Small Council. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. On Facebook, just search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. Again, you can email us at hosts@shatontv.com. The voicemail is 914-719-SHAT. The voicemail is 914-719-SHAT. If you would like to contribute to the podcast, you can send us a few bucks via PayPal, Venmo, or Amazon. Just go to shatontv.com/PayPal/Venmo and /Amazon. Thanks everyone who has been contributing. That really helps us as we gear up for Shat the Movies and The Watchmen coming up this fall. If you'd like to help us get a sponsor, just go to shatontv.com/survey. Take a quick survey, and that'll help us match up with sponsors who you'd like to hear from. Wherever where fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, please leave us a review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, be sure to check out all of our other TV shows on shatontv.com, where we review Westworld, Taboo, American Gods, and True Detective. You can find all that information at shatontv.com. And of course, don't forget to listen to our first love, Shat the Movies, where we will be resuming our normal weekly publications of 80s and 90s movie reviews. You can find that at shatthemovies.com. On behalf of my co-host, the King Bee, and Big D Dick Ebert, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us next Tuesday for the Game of Thrones series recap and Thronie Awards.
Thronies with my homies.